Have you ever watched a team of just absolute all-stars inexplicably stall out?
Oh, yeah, like, all the time.
Right, like you have top-tier talent, these massive budgets, and everyone looks incredible on paper, but the engine just won't catch. Or, on the flip side, maybe you've been part of a scrappy, super under-resourced team that somehow moved mountains and made it look effortless.
Yeah, the ones that just naturally click.
Exactly. And since you're someone who's always learning and looking to improve, you've probably wondered why that happens. So today, we are doing a deep dive into the underlying physics of all that. We're looking at a white paper by Connected EC, which was co-developed with Principles, and it's simply titled The Five C's.
This is such a fascinating read, honestly.
It really is. And our mission today is to uncover how organizations can transform workplace culture from this vague, soft concept into a really tangible, measurable system that directly drives performance.
Mhm.
Because culture is kind of like a smartphone's operating system.
Well, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah, like if the underlying OS is glitchy, it honestly doesn't matter how good the individual apps are or the individual employees in this case. The whole phone just crashes.
Right, the apps just keep freezing. And that's why most traditional attempts to fix this quote-unquote operating system fail so predictably. For decades, we've kind of treated culture like the weather.
Like it's just something that happens to you.
Exactly. People assume it's this ambient atmosphere. You know, you hope for a sunny day, but if a storm rolls in, you just hunker down and wait it out.
Yeah.
But this white paper completely rejects that premise.
Which I love.
Yeah, it argues that culture is a structural mechanism. When it's broken, decision-making slows down, your top performers leave, teams burn out. But when you understand the actual mechanics of it, culture becomes basically the most reliable strategic lever you can pull.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because before we dive into the five C's themselves and build a new system, we have to look at why the standard corporate playbook for fixing culture is so broken.
Right, the stuff everybody does, but nobody likes.
Yeah, exactly. Most organizations know culture is important, so they send out an annual engagement survey. Everyone rates their happiness from 1 to 5, and then management tries to artificially boost those scores. Why is that approach fundamentally flawed?
Well, the paper makes this really brilliant distinction between the symptoms of a problem and the root cause. They use this super powerful metaphor. They say outcome data is the smoke, while the underlying behaviors, which they identify as the five C's, are the fire underneath.
Oh, wow. Smoke versus
Oh,
fire?
yeah. So
Yeah.
when a company sends out one of those standard engagement surveys, they're really only measuring the smoke. They're tracking things like daily motivation, satisfaction, or whether an employee would recommend the company to a friend.
So it's basically like staring at a thermometer. Like, it tells you the organization has a fever, but it doesn't tell you if it's a minor cold or something completely severe. It just says, hey, your temperature is high. Or, your engagement score dropped 15 points.
Exactly. That is a perfect analogy, just flashes red. And because leaders only see the flashing light, they panic. They start throwing random solutions at it.
Like a pizza party.
Right. A pizza party here, a forced off-site retreat there, maybe a new wellness app. And none of that actually puts out the fire. They end up falling into this trap of chasing scores.
Just trying to game the metrics.
Exactly. Rather than fixing the foundational dynamics that are causing the disengagement in the first place. And the hidden costs of this cultural fracture, I mean, they are brutal.
What happens when they rely on those non-evidence-based approaches?
Well, the organization just stays stuck in this cycle. You get a short burst of awareness from the survey, followed by just long-term stagnation. And over time, trust actively erodes. Communication becomes heavily strained and filtered.
Right, which means clarity just evaporates. And leadership stops getting the truth. People start managing the message instead of managing the work. Like, if I'm terrified to tell my boss that my project is failing, I'm just going to spin the data to make it look green for as long as possible.
Yeah, and by the time the actual truth reaches the top, the damage is already done. Decision-making slows to a total crawl because nobody actually has accurate information.
Because the organization has shifted from being intentional to purely reactive.
Exactly. Teams spend all their cognitive energy just navigating the internal friction and protecting their own territory rather than, making an actual impact.
So chasing the smoke obviously doesn't work. Now that we know it doesn't work, what actually drives the system, let's move into the bedrock of this model. The five C's stand for connection, candid communication, clarity, collaboration, and contribution.
Right, those are the five.
And the white paper splits these up really nicely. So let's start with the first two, because they act as kind of the human foundation for the whole thing. If you don't have these, the rest of the model just falls apart. Let's start with connection. What does that actually look like?
So connection is defined as the trust, the care, and the well-being that allow people to show up fully. It really solves that profound pain point of isolation that so many people feel at work.
Yeah, feeling like you're just on an island.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We often think of the workplace purely in transactional terms, right? Like, I do the work, you pay me. But human beings are inherently wired for belonging. When an environment lacks connection, our brains subtly perceive the workplace as a threat environment.
Oh, that makes so much sense. So we keep our guard up.
We do.
Yeah.
We hesitate to share ideas. We worry about office politics. And the research in the paper drops a massive statistic here. Connection is the single strongest predictor of job satisfaction.
Wait, really? The absolute strongest predictor.
The strongest.
That is wild to me. So whether I'm satisfied with my job isn't about my salary or my fancy title or, my remote work perks. It's whether I feel deeply connected to the people around me.
Yeah, because it comes down to cognitive load.
Yeah.
When you feel connected and safe, you aren't wasting mental energy worrying about whether your boss secretly hates you.
Right.
You can just dedicate 100% of your brain power to the work itself. And that feels good. It creates deep satisfaction.
Which brings us perfectly to the second C, which is candid communication.
Yes, candid communication. This is defined as straightforward, respectful candor supported by psychological safety and healthy conflict. It completely solves that problem of filtered information and eroded transparency we were talking about earlier.
Because when candor is high, people raise the red flags early.
Exactly. They give constructive feedback without making it personal. And here is the other major statistic. While connection is the best predictor of satisfaction, candid communication is the absolute best predictor of performance.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting, because you have this fascinating split in the data. Over on one side, you have connection, which drives satisfaction and makes everyone feel happy. But over on the other side, you have candor, which is driving the actual execution, the performance.
Right, the bottom line.
Yeah. So it begs the question, can a team actually have one without the other? Like, if I'm a hard-charging startup founder, can I build a high-performing team based purely on brutal candor and just skip the warm and fuzzy connection part?
If we connect this to the bigger picture, the data says absolutely no. You really cannot separate them. It's an ecosystem for a reason.
Why is that?
Well, if you try to force candid communication without a foundation of deep connection, it isn't psychological safety. It just feels like an attack. It creates a toxic culture, not a high-performing one.
Oh, for sure, because if I don't know for a fact that you care about me and you start criticizing my project, my defenses immediately go up. I'm not listening to your feedback. I'm just planning my counterattack.
Exactly. The feedback loop completely shatters. Candor without connection is just aggression. But let's look at the reverse. What happens if you have incredibly high connection, but zero candor?
Oh, I've seen this. Everyone loves each other. You hang out on weekends. The vibes are just immaculate.
Yeah, but the team's performance tanks because nobody wants to be the bad guy. You end up with artificial harmony.
Right. Like, I see a massive flaw in your idea, but I don't want to hurt your feelings because we're friends, so I just say nothing.
And then the project fails. But hey, at least we didn't have an uncomfortable conversation.
That is such a tragedy of nice cultures. They just fail with a smile.
They really do. You need both forces acting simultaneously. Connection allows the candor to be received constructively, and candor ensures the connection is authentic.
Okay, so that's the human bedrock. You build a team that trusts each other deeply and they communicate honestly. But once you have that raw energy, how do you direct it to actually get work done?
Right, you have to harness it.
Exactly. Which brings us to the operational engine of the model. The final three sees clarity, collaboration, and contribution. We are moving from human dynamics into operational execution. Let's start with clarity.
So clarity is all about defining clear roles, workflows, and shared goals. Everyone needs to know exactly what matters and how to deliver it.
And ambiguity is just a massive energy drain. Like, without clarity, teams waste so much time just navigating confusion instead of driving outcomes.
Oh, 100%.
But let me push back on something. Let's say I have total clarity. I know my role, my deadlines, I have my marching orders. If I have all that, why do I need a separate focus on the next C, collaboration? Shouldn't that just naturally happen?
I'd actually argue it's the exact opposite. Perfect clarity on your individual role can create silos if you aren't careful. You could have 5 brilliant people who know exactly what they're doing, but the friction happens in the handoffs.
Ah, I see.
Collaboration solves the pain point of teams working in silos. It's the mechanical act of mutual support and shared accountability.
So it's a difference between 5 people running individual sprints on the same track versus a relay race.
Yes. Perfect.
Like, if we don't practice the baton pass, which is the collaboration, it literally doesn't matter how fast I run my leg of the race. If the baton drops, the whole team loses.
That is a brilliant way to look at it. You can have incredibly high individual talent, but without systemic collaboration, you fail to operate as a cohesive unit.
Okay, so we have the engine running, we trust each other, we tell the truth, we know our roles, and we pass the baton perfectly. But even if an engine is running beautifully, it doesn't matter if you're driving off a cliff. Which brings us to the final C, contribution.
Right. Contribution is the practice of helping people see exactly how their specific daily work aligns with the organization's overarching vision and impact.
It's about meaning.
Exactly. And ensures people find meaning in their efforts. Because lacking this leads directly to disengagement and attrition. People need to know their work actually matters.
Yeah, that word mattering really strikes a chord. I mean, think about people who work at massive corporations. They might be paid well, but they get profoundly depressed because they feel like they are just pushing spreadsheets into a black hole.
And that is a dangerous place for a company to be.
Yeah.
When people question whether their work matters, the psychological tax is just too high. Contribution connects the micro task to the macro purpose.
So we have the full picture now. Connection, candid communication, clarity, collaboration, and contribution. And we should share some of the heavy-hitting statistics from the research because this model was rigorously tested.
Yeah, the data drop here is significant. When you combine the 5 C's, they collectively explain about half of the variance in overall job satisfaction.
Let's stop there for a second because variance can sound a bit academic. What does that actually mean for the listener's day-to-day life?
Sure, so imagine 2 employees working at the exact same company. Same job title, same salary, same exact commute. But employee A loves going to work, and employee B is miserable and actively looking to quit.
Okay.
The data tells us that 50% of that massive difference in their daily experience comes down entirely to these 5 behaviors.
Wow, half of the entire game of job satisfaction is just wrapped up in the 5 C's.
Yes. And it goes further. They account for nearly 80% of an employee's satisfaction with the organizational culture itself. And they explain roughly 25 to 33% of the variance in organizational commitment.
Meaning whether or not someone decides to stay or leave.
Exactly.
So what does this all mean? Let me play devil's advocate for the listener for a second. Let's say I'm a leader. I buy into the 5 C's. I respect the data. How do I actually use this on Monday morning without it turning into just another one of those fluffy pulse surveys we criticized in Section 1?
This raises an important question, and it's really the bridge to the actionable roadmap. The 5 C's are not just a static checklist. They function as a dynamic system, like a domino effect.
A domino effect.
Yeah. Connection fuels candid communication, because I trust you. I can tell you the truth. Candid communication then enables clarity. Because we're speaking honestly, we can define our goals accurately.
I see the chain reaction. And then clarity strengthens collaboration. Because we know who is doing what, we can pass the baton, which finally amplifies contribution.
Exactly. But to trigger that domino effect, you need an actual diagnostic tool, not just good intentions. This is where taking the Principles 5 C's assessment comes in.
Okay, how does that work?
It allows leaders to measure the 5 C's on a 1 to 100 scale. So you get a real diagnostic readout.
Yeah.
You might see, okay, our connection is at an 85, but our clarity is sitting at a 30.
Oh, so it pinpoints your exact blind spots. It identifies your stretched areas and team misalignment.
Precisely. If your clarity is at a 30, you don't need a team building offsite to build trust. Your connection is fine. You need to sit down with a whiteboard and map out the workflow.
That fundamentally changes everything. You aren't guessing anymore. You have a developmental tool to target specific behavioral changes and track progress over time.
And that is how culture becomes a measurable competitive advantage.
Well, to synthesize this deep dive for you, listening culture isn't abstract, and it certainly isn't solved by a values poster. It's a research-backed, measurable ecosystem. It requires the bedrock of connection and candid communication, and the operational engine of clarity, collaboration, and contribution.
I would actually challenge you to mentally audit your own workplace right now. Which of the 5 C's feels the strongest in your current team? And more importantly, where are your blind spots?
It's such a great question to ask yourself. And as you head into your next team meeting, I want to leave you with one final thought based on the data. If the research proves that candid communication is the absolute strongest predictor of performance, what is the true cost of the things left unsaid?